How Rick Rubin went from a broke college student running a record label
to one of the kings of hip-hop. But if you've met Rick back in the day, you'd never guess he'd make it in the rap world. Well, that's because there was nothing about him that screamed future rap producer. Like,
yeah, it screams rock. Gives me rock vibes. If you look at him, look at his hair and shades and all that, it gives me like, you know, rock.
Keep it real for a second.
The man was a dorky white philosophy major studying at NYU who lived for punk rock. Rap wasn't something his friends messed with, nor was it something he liked as a kid. Plus, Rick grew up middle class to well-off parents, so he had basically nothing to do with street culture. None of the main forces that pushed people towards the hip-hop world were there for Rick. So how does someone like him get into the scene? All he had to do was give it a listen. The way Rick tells it, it was love at first sight. One day, on a whim, he gave rap a chance, and the music clicked with him.
What was it about hip-hop that attracted you? This kid from Long Island at NYU.
It wasn't made by people who went to the music conservatory. It was made by kids who felt something.
The rawness and sincerity that made him love punk rock as a kid made becoming a hip-hop lover a more natural transition than you think. Once Rick gained a taste for rap, he was hooked. And studying in New York City meant he was in the perfect place to get in touch with the local scene. It didn't take long for him to start spending his nights hitting up clubs rather than hitting the books at uni. You have to wonder what was going through the head of the DJs watching this awkward white kid shuffle his way onto the floor. With time, Rick would become a regular and feel right at home dancing the night away. But the time Rick was spending clubbing wasn't just fun. It was something that would lead to him realizing something that would change the music world forever. Rap and R&B are similar, but they aren't the same thing. Nowadays, that is so obvious. But you gotta remember, we live in a world where rap is one of the most popular genres on the planet. Back when it was still small and underground, people didn't know what it was, so they just kind of treated it like R&B's weird little cousin. Rap had its own unique sound, driven by record scratches and beats. Yeah, the records released in that era would replace those elements with your typical R&B band. Rick picked up on this right away when listening to early rap records.
I would see these groups live, and there was an energy in the room that was a very specific feeling. And then the records that would come out didn't have that feeling.
It left him wishing for official rap releases that sounded more like what he heard in the club. He didn't want rap albums to sound like diet R&B. He wanted them to sound like rap, and it was likely a lot of rap fans felt the same. But what separated Rick from any old devoted fan is that he didn't just complain about the issue. He decided he was going to fix it one way or another.
We just got a label deal with CBS, Columbia Records, actually, for a whole lot of money.
Rick hated the sound of rap records so much that he made his own label. He had nothing but his own passion driving him as he worked to make his records in his cramped dorm room. And somehow, he managed to convince Tila Rock to work with him to drop It's Yours in 1983. After all the blood, sweat, and tears, it was time to put his theory to the test. Would rap listeners really enjoy a more stripped-down, bare sound? Much to the shock of those in the industry, the answer was an overwhelming yes. People loved the sound, so Rick was rewarded with partnership with Russell Simmons, a rap legend in his own right. Yeah, from there, things started taking off. Def Jam Records was swiftly changing from the side hustle of a college student to a booming business. And with Russell's connections, Rick was meeting with artist after artist. He wasn't a fan with the dream anymore. He was on the path to becoming one of the most influential producers in hip-hop history. If you have a favorite big rapper from the 80s, the chances are they worked with Rick. He dropped stuff with LL Cool J, turned the Beastie Boys from punk rockers to rappers, and was turned—
Damn, Beastie Boys to rockers. So they went from like rock music to rap music. Like, damn. And I never heard of Beastie Boys music day in my life. I just heard of their names, you know, that I never heard it. I never heard not one song of the Beastie Boys.
Run DMC into a household name.
And all of a sudden you'd hear a song that he made on the radio, and it was weird. That was like a transition, like, wow, that's cool.
One of Rubin's biggest accomplishments would be convincing Run DMC into making their own version of Walk This Way. The rappers themselves would have never done it without his persuasion. They were certain the track would ruin them, yet it would become their third most listened to song to date. If all that wasn't enough, Rick and Def Jam would go on to introduce the world to Public Enemy, a group that essentially revolutionized rap, but that was normal for Def Jam. Rick only knew how to aim high. The records he produced were career-defining, and the artists he signed were some of the kings of the era. You can't overstate how much Rick ruled hip-hop.
Rick Rubin is one of the pillar stones of hip-hop. He didn't pioneer the production, he didn't pioneer the rap, but he pioneered a certain energy for it to be daring.
Rick's success may be undeniable, but that doesn't mean it's easy to understand. Why was this one guy so good at producing songs that spoke to people? Yeah, he connected with artists with a ton of talent and potential, but that wasn't enough to make hits the way he was. What was that special ingredient? Well, sure wasn't music talent, I'll tell you that.
Do you play instruments?
Barely.
Do you know how to work a soundboard?
No, I have no technical ability, and I know nothing about music.
You must know something.
Well, I know what I like and what I don't like.
Rick's producing style wasn't about seeming sophisticated or complex. He'd simply come into the recording studio, typically barefoot, and see how the music made him.
That ass? You walk in the stool with no feet on? Like, nah, he different.
Remember, Rick entered the music world as a fan, and he never stopped seeing himself as one. He focused on making records that sounded good to him, rather than what he thought would sell. While the artist would play a track, he'd listen, searching for the way the music made him feel. Did their work make him happy, energized, or he'd take note and give feedback accordingly? He gave a lot of feedback. Don't let him fool you. Rubin was not afraid to tell an artist when he wasn't feeling their work. He's not the type of producer who just lets anything get the green light in the studio. He knows what his standards are, and he's not willing to let records air that are below them. In a YouTube comment on an interview with Rick, Sir Mix-a-Lot admits that Rick's guidance was crucial in making him a better artist. I worked with Rick Rubin coming directly off 2 platinum albums on an independent label. I was young, arrogant, and I assumed my previous success somehow made me Rick's equal. Obviously, I was wrong. Before Rick, I was able to deliver a project, and it was never questioned. When I started sending tracks to Rick in late 1991, his feedback was both encouraging and humbling. He could sniff out when I was genuine in a track versus mimicking the hot shit of the day. I totally disagreed with him when he said Baby Got Back was the best track on the record. Oops, he indirectly taught me to stay both hungry and humble. Another skill of Rick was doing less. A lot of producers want to pack songs to the brim with effects and additions, but not Rick. His first major success came from making rap records that weren't afraid to take away the fluff and sound like rap. When he listens to tracks, he is not listening for what they need. A lot of the times, he's looking for what they don't need. The things that are taken away from the crispness, stopping them from being fun to listen to. Some have criticized this approach as being too hands-off and claim that Rick doesn't bring anything of value to the table. He's not some music genius and doesn't pretend to be. But does that mean he hasn't helped the artists he's worked with? People who brush off Rick don't make any sense to me. How can you look at a guy with so many wins under his belt and think it's all just luck? Okay, what about the tracks he pushed for that no one believed in? Or the artists he highlighted that were unsure of their own work? Rick's not your average producer, but he's more than proven that you don't need to be a normal stuffy executive to make a good record. You just need to know what listeners want to hear.
Under the belt with one in the head, nigga. Nothing to help, I want it with the feds. Anybody kill up for anybody, straight up anybody out there with anybody real.
Almost 40 years after
That sound like Jay-Z. Comment down below, is that Jay-Z? Let me know.
Def Jam's founding.
Rick is still working with artists like Jay-Z and Eminem and has shown that he still has what it takes to make a track turn to gold. He's been dropping bangers since he was just a college kid with a passion, and there's no reason to think he'll stop now. Rick Rubin has forever cemented himself as a legend in the music world, but that doesn't mean he's done with music. It's only a matter of time before he produces a track that shakes up the music world all over again. If you enjoy learning about legends that made hip-hop, or you want to hear about the epic failures in the rap world, make sure to hit that subscribe.
Okay, that's the vid. Let me know what y'all think, bro. Let me know what is your favorite. What is this guy what songs that this guy produced that is your favorite. Let me know. All right, make sure y'all like, comment, subscribe. Y'all know the vibes. Whoever just checking out, you are.